I'm Brandy Kozlowski, and the camerawoman is Kayla Costello. I'm interviewing Mr. Dellerba. He served in the Army from 1962 to 1964. His highest rank was E-4, which is the same as a sergeant. Today's date is December 9th, 2003. What's your full name?
John Peter Dellerba.
When and where were you born?
I was born in Utica, New York in 1940.
What kind of education and occupation did you have prior to service?
Well, I had some college. I had graduated high school and I had some college. Didn't complete college at the time when I was drafted into the Army in 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Did you enlist? No, you were drafted.
No,
yeah,
I was drafted.
Yeah, you were drafted.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I should
No,
wait for your
no,
questions.
it's okay. It's fine. It's
Okay.
fine. It's okay. How many years were you in the military?
2 years.
2 years?
Yeah, that's usually the stint for draftees, unless there's a war or something on, then they keep you longer.
Where did you receive basic training?
In Fort Knox, Kentucky.
What do you remember of it? Like about it?
Well, it was winter time. I went down in October, and it was winter time, and some of the so-called field duty they give you. You go out in the field. It was very tough because it was 10 degrees, and we were out there for long periods of time, and you were cold, and there was no place to warm up at times. So that part of it, and it was a new experience for me to get up at 2:30 in the morning to cook for all the troops, especially when it was freezing, and I had no way of thawing all the food that they brought out to us. So I used to have to stay up all night with burners on to thaw the meat. So that was a new experience. And I realized I was fairly young. I was only 23, and I had been kind of spoiled. In America, you know, you get everything you want. You're not going to be subject to that kind of thing. So it actually was good for me to see that it's not as easy as everybody thinks it is. So that was one of my experiences anyway.
So how long did it take to cook the food since it was so cold outside?
Well, once I got it thawed out, then it wasn't too bad. We had, we had sufficient equipment to cook it, but the idea was to get it thawed, and that required somebody to stay up all night, because obviously it wasn't going to thaw in 10 degrees, so we stayed up all night for that. And that was tough because there was nobody to relieve me the next day, so with no sleep at all, I had to cook for the troops.
So how long did it take? So how long was it before you got like actual good sleep, or did you never?
I did get some sleep after. That was 2 or 3 days. Once we got the food thawed, then it was just cold storage, and it wasn't. It wouldn't refreeze on it. We managed after that. They sent in a lot of food not frozen because we did complain some.
The dehydrated food? Or?
Some dehydrated food and some fresh, and we were able to maintain the normal feeding over the 30-day period that we were out there.
Specifically, what were you trained for?
Actually, I was trained for cook. I mean, they do train you for, in basic training, they train you for, as a fighter. You know, you get combat training, you get a weapon, and you do target practice and all that. So that's essential for everybody going in, because that's what it may come down to. I mean, if the enemy comes in, you throw away all you just leave all your equipment and you go into wherever hiding you and become an infantryman. Everybody does, under certain circumstances. That's why you need that basic training to be able to know how to shoot, when to shoot, bayonet training, grenade training, all the things that you need to fight a war. And that comes first. Then the cooking part of it comes after. And they trained me to cook. I went into that for, forgot what it was now, it might have been about a month. They trained us for cooking.
What was your highest rank of service?
I was called an E-4 specialist, and they made me first cook, which meant that I was supervisor over a certain amount of cooks while I was in Germany.
What is E-4?
E-4 is just a rank. They rank the soldiers. They start you out as, I think it's E3 when you first go in, which means private first class. Means that's your lowest rank on the pole. They give everybody that. I think it's even lower. They might start you out at E2, and you get one stripe, and that's E3. And then from there on in, it's E4, E5, all the way up. And so-called you're a non-commissioned officer. It's not like lieutenant and captain, which are called commissioned officers. That's a different criterion to become that type of officer.
How long did it take you to become?
Actually, I was pretty lucky. I became an E4. I think it must have been a year's time or less. They decided to promote me to that, and I appreciated that because, of course, in the Army at that time you were only getting $78 a month, so it wasn't a whole lot of money to. Of course, you didn't have too many places to spend it either because you were pretty well locked into the base and very busy. But $78 a month for a guy who I was single at the time, living home, but for a married guy, $78 a month, and if you had, like a wife and children, it was pretty tough to make a living on that. It's since has gone very much higher than that. I think today it's probably $600 or $700 a month again.
And you said you went in during like the Cuban Missile Crisis?
Yes, it did.
What did you think about President Kennedy and his
Well,
ideas on the?
yeah, I thought he was taking a good stand. I thought his, calling their bluff and holding firm that you're not going to do this. You got to get your missiles out of there because you're too much of a threat to this United States. And I appreciated what he was saying, and I think he was doing the right thing to hold his own. And it worked out. They turned around. I mean, they put the blockade up and they turned around. And Khrushchev, I think, was more bark than bite. He was making a lot of noise, but I think he was afraid to go to war with us. I think they've always been afraid to go to war with us because even today it's coming to be known that they didn't have as much power as we thought they did because the nation just was, they did a lot of, propaganda, I would call it, where they showed a lot of military tanks and stuff, but I think if we ever did go to war with them, excluding nuclear war, I mean, that would have destroyed everybody. I think we would have easily beat them, easier than we did with the Germans in the Second World War and the First World War. So I think, again, I have a high regard for President Kennedy, and I think he did the right thing.
Well, my idea of Cold War was like us always against the Russians and Soviet Union. What was your idea? Like, did you?
Well, yeah, that's what it was. It was two ideologies. It was their communism versus our democracy. We felt that ours was a better government. We still feel that way, and it looks like it is because look what happened to Russia. I don't believe communist countries can make it because there's no incentive. They keep everything under such control that a free country has the advantage of utilizing everybody versus just a few people that are in top government. And I think a lot is lost in communism because there's a lot of great minds that if given the right opportunity, like in a democracy, like here, I mean, the smallest or the poorest person can go on to become president, and that's an advantage that no communist country is going to give their people. So I always feel that ours is a better government, and the Cold War was that thing. It was just saying, you're not right, we are, and went back and forth. And the bad part of it was we kept building up the nuclear arms and we're worried about destroying the whole planet eventually if we ever did go to war, a nuclear war. We were afraid of that. And I, as a kid, I was always afraid that was going to happen. I was petrified because we used to have air raid drills, used to get under our desks. Like that wasn't going to save us. I mean, if they dropped an H-bomb, I don't think we're going to save us. But we went through the drill. It was at least comforting to think we were doing something to try to save ourselves. I'm sorry, you had a question?
No, I was agreeing, I was saying that, like, whatever Russia did, we had to do, like, if they built something, we had to do
Yeah.
it. If they went into space, we had to do
Yeah,
it.
right, it was an ego thing too, you know, our country over your country, and yeah, especially when the Sputnik went up in 57, it was really devastating to us that they beat us into space, you know, and that's when they went to this real race to get a man on the moon. We wanted to be first on the moon, and a lot of money went into research. It was good for the country, in a sense, but we were upset that they beat us with that Sputnik in 57 to put it out in space. But we quickly turned that around and put a lot into. That's where we said everybody take science and physics and math and everything and try to go into the science. That's where we tapped into our youth and saying this is the way to go, and you'll find plenty of work in government because we need you to help us get to the moon. And it worked out well. We've got great minds in this country.
Discuss your role during your service in chronological order. Where were you? What do you remember of it, and why were you there?
Okay, what had happened after Kennedy called their bluff and the missiles were all taken out, things changed. And instead of me going, of course, to Cuba and fighting Cubans, they decided to ship me to Germany, where actually, if you think about it, the war ended in 1945, and so we're just talking 17 years later. It's 1962. We were concerned that Germany was going to rise up again. So we had a lot of troops in Germany to keep watch on them. I hate to say that we didn't trust them, and there are some Americans that don't trust them today, because they're a strong-willed people, and some of them still feel they'd like to take over the world. That's a belief. I'm not sure if that's true, but a lot of Americans still believe that. So they're comfortable with Americans in Germany keeping the lid on it, making sure that they don't uprise again and try to conquer the whole world like Hitler did in the Second World War. So I was shipped to Germany, but as it turned out, because there was no actual wartime, it turned into a kind of a goodwill ambassador kind of thing. In other words, we were over there, but we weren't. We were trying not to cause any problems. Some Germans still hated the Yankee because we beat them in war, so they didn't like Americans. Some Germans. That's not true because I had great experiences over there. I got to be friends with a couple of German families, and had correspondence with them maybe for 10 years after I got out of the service. Let me get this thing out here. Like, jog my memory here. I wrote some of this stuff. Yeah, that's what I mentioned here. Particularly, I made friends with this one German family where they had a woman who came in from Berlin. She was, I call her a woman, she was 18 years old, pretty close to the age you people are. And I was only 22, so we dated. And that, being 4,000 miles away from home and being a little homesick, when somebody like that comes into your life, it helps make it a little easier in a foreign country. She spoke fluent English, so she became my interpreter. Everywhere we went, she was able to translate the language, which is a tough thing. When you're in a foreign country, everywhere you go, nobody understands you. I mean, they all talk German. And I couldn't pick up on the language as quick as I wanted. I learned a few phrases like, how are you, what time is it, a few things like that, but as far as learning the whole language, I just don't have the time. So she was my interpreter. And on top of that, she had a young niece, a 10-year-old niece, who she had to care after. She had to take care of. So whenever we went anywhere, swimming or for a cup of hot chocolate, we went for a lot of, there's a particular little coffee shop, we went for hot chocolate. We took the niece. And at this swimming pool, I actually taught her how to swim. And again, this is probably unlike your other interviews where you have had people in war and fighting. I was in a peace, this was a peaceful kind of thing for me for 2 years, and very loving. I got to love this family for what they did for me. And this girl is today 49 years old. She's 49 years old. And I like to think if I ever went back to Germany, she may have ended up, being my wife or something. I actually got more knowing her more than the one I was dating, who was 18, who got married and came to the States, and we talked. I called her a few times, but she was married. I didn't want to sound like I was make waves with her husband,
Yeah.
but it was explained to her husband that we were friends over in Germany, and the husband understood. And but I did make friends with more of a friend with the niece, and she wrote to me for about 10 years. And like I say, it was a quiet time and a very enjoyable time in Germany for me, and I appreciated being. I don't think I would have ever gotten an opportunity to visit a foreign country. My parents were not well-to-do. I come from a poor family, so we didn't get a chance to travel. Abroad. Most people can't because it's very expensive. But the other thing was that's the reason I got drafted. Many of my friends, very close friends, went on to college. I wasn't able to, so they were excluded from the draft because they were in school, which I wasn't. So we separated. But they wrote me, we stayed friends over the years. So much for that.
So it's been a while since you talked to...
Yeah, I lost contact. After those 10 years, my life got complicated without even going into detail. Now I'm married and children. Now we're talking, I'm 32, I'm married with children, and I'm focusing on that part of my life. And I just got away from writing, and I feel bad about that. I should have kept it up. But I just got away from writing, and because life does that to you. You're away from somebody so long that you might experience yourself. You'll have strong friends in school, and you say, we're going to keep in touch, but they'll go to California. You might write them for a little while, then after a while you're going. I even have a daughter she's in Florida, and she had a very close friend, and they become distant because the friends stayed up here, and they just don't get together as much as they should. So those things happen over time. Things change.
Okay. How did you keep in touch with your family and friends back home?
Letter writing. Yeah, a lot of letter writing. Of course, there was no internet, and there was no computers or anything like that. So it was a lot of letter writing, and very often, especially with my mother, I was very close to her. My father wasn't with us anymore. He left us in '52, so I wasn't too close to my father after that. And I was very much in touch with my mother and my sisters and brothers, and my closest friends. I had 3 or 4 close friends which I wrote to all the time.
What kind of relationship did you have with the civilian population in Germany?
Well, I was, like I said, I had these two families which I had dinner over their house. And we've become very close, the friendships were very close friendships with them. And I had another stroke of luck, a close military friend was a German. What happened was he lived in Germany and he came to this country to become an American. So he was living in New York City. Am I going too fast for you here?
No, you keep talking, I can write.
Okay. And what happened was he got drafted about the same time I did, and they shipped him right back to Germany. And he was about 100 miles from his mother. And we become very close friends, and they invited me to their house for Christmas of '63. And the night I was there, the Christmas Eve I was there, again, I was a very emotional person. I've always been an emotional person. And they gave me gifts that night. And I didn't expect any gifts, and they were passing presents around, and a number of presents came my way. And I was just almost in tears that these people did that for me. And I wrote them for a long time too after. But again, the writing stopped because of our lives changed. But it's another family. I wrote him and invited him to Utica, New York. And he spent a couple days with me, and I took him all around Utica and showed him some of our features here, if we could compare to New York City. But he was amazed at the space between the houses here, because he was living in New York. It's so tight. When he came upstate, when he came here, he was amazed at the roominess here. But I would think he would have saw that in Germany too. But this was one of his remarks. Wow, look at all the room you have here. And I said, yeah, well, we don't have as great a population as New York City does. But he was a super guy, and I lost contact with him. I wished I could make contact with him. I may do that someday, try to find out where he is now. So that's so much for Germany, and the people were great. I just enjoyed my 2 years there. It was just fascinating. And I did some traveling. I went to, I should have went to Italy, because that's my heritage, but I didn't. I went into the Scandinavian countries, and Copenhagen is one of the countries I visited. And I had actually a good experience there too. I met a person on the way up, and for a short period of time we became friends. If you can imagine this, you're on a train, and the whole, I've always pictured when I was younger, I mean, you think of a ferry, when you think of a ferry, you know, that carries cars over water. Well, there's giant-sized ferry that carry trains. So what happens is the ferry lines up with the shore, the track, and the train goes right into the ferry in the bottom, and you get out and you go upstairs. Now you're on a boat. It's like a luxury liner. And I was with this girl from Copenhagen, and we had lunch together, and she talked English, and it was a great experience. She wished me the best. She was probably 21, 22, an older woman. Well, no, about my same age. She's about my same age. And she was she was going back to her husband at the time. She was returning to her husband. Had visited people in Germany and was returning to her husband in, I think it was Sweden. She was going back to Sweden. And I got her name and everything, but I didn't keep it. I didn't write it down, so I may have dropped her a line too. I may have wrote her. I would have wrote her if I got the information, but I didn't want to be too aggressive there, because I only knew her. She might have thought I was, and I don't want you to get this wrong, hitting on her, and I wasn't. I was just trying to be a friend.
Yeah, okay. Can you recall your most memorable experience, like the people, places, anything?
I would say, for for one, like I already mentioned this, the going to that swimming pool every day with my, I'll call her my girl at the time, she was my girl, and her young niece. And just feeling non-military for a little while. You know what I mean? It became like a home away from home, so as to speak. Again, there was no war on, so my military, should I say, military frame of mind kind of left me, because being there was no war on, and I was a cook, most of the time I wasn't doing military stuff. So I become like, I become some detached from it. I hope you don't, I'm not saying this to have you think that I wasn't ready to go to war if I had to, but it just wasn't an issue at the time. So I had 2 years and I wanted to make the best of it, so I made friends with these people, and I spent a lot of time in civilian clothes rather than military clothes. So again, this interview is probably much unlike the others where they were fighting and there was wars on. I got an older brother who was in World War II, and he actually got wounded by a Japanese sniper. But me going into my comparison to what he went through and what I'm going through is no comparison, because real war is really tough. And I'm sure you've interviewed some people that, I don't know if you've interviewed.
No, you're our first interview. Right?
Oh, okay, so the next interview might be somebody who, like from Vietnam, who actually saw, you know, a lot of carnage, a lot of bombing. And I didn't see all that. I don't know if I should say I'm lucky I didn't see all that, but if that was the case, then my life would have been much different. But I was fortunate not to have to go into war, so mine was kind of a peacetime mission over in Germany.
Cold War was like a peacetime mission. It wasn't really war, it was more...
Yeah, right. It was just tension, a lot of tension. And yeah, the Cold War was on, and we watched the news daily, and it seemed like nobody was budging. The Russians were making a lot of noise about building up nuclear war, and so was our country. But there was no real threat that they were actually going to go to war, because both sides were afraid. Because in a nuclear war, not even the higher-ups are safe. So that makes them hesitate to go to war. I mean, there's no place to hide in a nuclear war. So that and I still think that's true today. That's why we went into the disarmament, and hopefully it'll stay that way.
So you think it would have been nuclear war if, like, Kennedy didn't do anything about the missiles?
I think we would have went to war. I think there would have been a possible nuclear war, yes. I think they would have tried to strategically destroy us before we even had a chance to get off the ground, because I think what they were planning on doing is setting up enough nuclear arms and pointing them at all our strategic places, which Rome was one of them, because we had the air base. They were going to knock out all our greatest power places and just devastate us, so they could just walk in at some time and just clean up. In other words, they're going to try to wipe us off the map so that they were the supreme power of the world after they destroyed us. Because at the time we were still the most powerful nation in the world, and they wanted to wipe us out. That's my belief, and I think it was everybody else's too.
Yeah, probably. What was your reaction to military leadership overall, and like in between like your individual unit? Like, what did you think about, like,
I think it was very good. Fort Knox, I had an excellent drill sergeant, and I felt that discipline was of the utmost importance in any military unit. I mean, you have to be able to act fast and do right, and anybody who is shoddy or tries to do it the easy way is going to end up dead. And this is what our drill sergeant says. You know, the better trained you are, the better chances of surviving a war. You know, if you know what to do when the enemy's coming at you, you've got a better chance to survive. And our drill sergeant was the best. We turned out to be the best unit. We won all the awards in basic training.
How many awards did you win?
I think maybe there was 6 or 7 for, you know, best marching, best, how should I say it? I can't think of all the awards, but there were 6 or 7 that were handed out, and we took everything because of his, I think because of his leadership. And I mean, he was a hard man. Just to give you an experience that I had, you know, I was very in shape. You know, I believed in being in shape all my life. So when I went into basic training, it wasn't hard for me to do 50 push-ups or all the things they ask you to do. I had to run every day. I was a runner. I was a runner from 1958. I was jogging before it was a fad. I used to run 5 miles a day every day back in 1958. I mean, that was before I even went in the Army. So I was in pretty good shape, so I didn't have a hard time becoming a good person in his unit. Again, I'm blowing my horn here. I'm boasting. And, but I did have one encounter with him. We had to take our weapons all apart. It was part of the training. Because you had to clean it. You had to keep your weapon dry and clean, you know, all the time. Mm-hmm. So they had to train us how to take them all apart and then put them back together. Well, mine didn't go back together, wouldn't go back together. So he gave us a deadline, and I just simply, I mean, the sweat started streaming down because I knew I was in for it from this guy. When you don't do it right, you're in for it. He come over and he says, put it together. I said, it won't go together. Put it together. And I had a steel helmet on at the time because we were dressed in full uniform for some reason, because you're supposed to be able to do this when you got all your gear on. And it was very warm in the barracks, but that was part of the training. You got a grin and bear it, so you're sweating, nobody cares. And he started hitting me in the head with his helmet, right on top of my helmet, and it was like the bells of St. Mary. I mean, this thing started to vibrate into my ears, and he did that to get me, and I frantically tried to put this thing together, and it just wouldn't go together. So he says, give that to me, I'll show you how it's done, and he couldn't put it together. It was a defective weapon. So, but he didn't apologize. He just grunted, and that was the end of that. And that was probably the toughest experience, because that's the first time that that I wasn't able to do what they asked of me. You know, everything. If you tell me to do push-ups, you tell me to run, you tell me to shoot at a target, you tell me to do anything, I did it. And in other words, I was going on to be, in fact, I made Soldier of the Month in the unit I finally ended up with, because I did all the things you're supposed to do as a soldier. I kept my equipment up, I kept my clothes in order, I passed all the inspections, did all the things, because I'm a person who does what's asked of him under certain conditions. In the military, it's very important that you stay subordinate to your officers. Otherwise, we're not going to win the war. I don't know if you realize how important that is in the military. So that part of it. Then I made some close friends in the military, and again, when you were 4,000 miles away from home, and I wasn't with the German families, I was in the barracks, I had a couple of close friends, and that German kid was one of them. And then this other kid, Dave, he's from Massachusetts, he became a close friend. Dave Lethanan was his name. And he was a good listener. You know how it is you, even in your friendships, when you're feeling bad and you got somebody that you can talk to. He was a good listener, and he would listen to me just go on and on and on, and I appreciated that, and I loved him for it. He's a good man.
Did you perform any unusual service?
Yeah. Well, actually, wasn't really service. I had an unusual circumstance. We had an incident in the, again, I'm a cook, so I'm in the mess hall. And I had mentioned in the write-up I gave you that in general I was happy with it, but sometimes the non-commissioned officers would get drunk. You know what I mean? They'd go downtown and they would meet girls or do whatever, and they would come into work not ready. It's not like they're going into battle, but still they shouldn't come into work like that. And had one come in drunk, and he was doing stupid things, and he was knocking pans around, and then he was. I had a cake in the oven. I was baking a cake. I was on pastry at the time, and I had cakes and pies I would have. He reached in, grabbed the top of one of my cakes, burned his hand a little, but it wasn't too hot on top, and spit in the cake. And then he put it back, and it cooked down to not know that it was even there. But I knew what cake it was, and I wouldn't serve it. Of course, I pulled it off, and he was reported for that. And I got pulled in as a witness to the court-martial. And that was an experience. I had to say exactly to all the officers at the court-martial exactly what I'm saying to you. And I was kind of scared. And if the sergeant was going to come after me after, but I told the truth. I said, this is what he did. And they said, did your cake get served? I said, no, the cake didn't get served. So that was actually in this guy's favor, because it could have got people sick or diseased or whatever. So that was a very unusual circumstance. But other than that, it was fairly routine, cooking every day. Some of the experiences of cooking were odd, like I cooked, when you say a dash of salt, you know, when you're cooking, you put a dash of salt, it was a pound of salt, because of the volume that we were cooking for. At times, I was cooking for 2,000 people. And then those times I was only cooked for a couple hundred, which was better because you wouldn't be put on only one thing. You would cook a little of this, a little, almost like cooking at home for a big family. And, and that was my duty for about a year while I was in Germany. I had to cook for about 250 people, which was much easier to do than 2,000. But again, I had to get up at 2:30 in the morning to make breakfast. And what was actually in my favor but not in my favor, my sergeant, my superior at the time, he owned a restaurant here in the States. So he tried to run the mess hall like a restaurant. Eggs to order, steak to order. You know, you would think he was working in a restaurant in New York City the way he wanted us to cook. But it turned out good because I learned a lot from him and the other cooks. So I learned to cook. I do a lot of cooking today.
Still like to cook?
Yeah, I still like to cook. I prepare all the Thanksgiving dinner for my family, everything. But they don't. My wife doesn't even come in the kitchen. So she sits and watches ball games like the guy does. So it's kind of a reversal of what they do. Even my kids don't come in the kitchen, except maybe just they come in and say, "Do you want help?" But when you're cooking, it's so I don't know. It's so synchronized that nobody can really come in. It's like a chef in a New York restaurant. You're kind of doing your own thing. You know when this is coming out of the oven, so it's so synchronized that you got to kind of run the whole show. Not to sound boastful here, but I generally do it all myself, so I don't get into conflict with anybody on how it's got to be done. But again, I learned a lot from the, and then this you might find a little unusual. One of the cooks who taught me the most in the Army, he left Germany and he came to the States. And he was stationed in Georgia. And my brother went into the Army. They made him a cook, and he got the same sergeant. What are the chances? You know, put that in the Guinness book. Yeah, because he asked who I was. The sergeant asked my brother, "Who's this guy to you?" He said, "Oh, he's my brother." So the chances of that happening. And my brother wrote to me about that. And that was really great, the way that happened. Okay, let's see. Yeah, that's, again, it becomes very routine, and let's see, I don't think anything else happened. I used to get into a little bit of, I'm an opinionated person. I used to get into some disagreement with my officers. One officer come over, and I disagreed with him on some things. He wouldn't let me deviate on the cooking. As I got more knowing how to do it, I tried to, you know, make it taste a little better for the troops, because you know how everybody talks Army food is the worst thing in the world. And he fought me on it, and I said, well, I'm going to do it anyway. So he used to threaten me I was going to get in trouble and all that, but I didn't pay too much attention to him. But he did holler at me a lot. So for that, not for that I was doing anything real wrong, I just was trying to make it better for the people. And it turned out that some of the officers used to come back into the kitchen and get some of the special pancakes I was making, because I wasn't following the Army recipe. I was doing my own thing, and they tasted better. And so these officers even went along with it, and that saved myself a couple times, because this girl that I talked about, I was with her one evening, and I had a 12 o'clock curfew. I had to be back. And the evening was going so great that I didn't get back until about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was in trouble. And the officers that I used to give the food to, the better food to, they helped me get out of trouble. I don't know if I'm getting this Army in trouble on it, but this is the way the world goes. One hand washes the other. And they helped me. And then I promised not to do that anymore, of course, not to do stupid things. But that happens to you in the Army. I mean, when you're with somebody, you forget. You break the rules. Sometimes you break the rules. And that's about it in the military. I can't think of anything else. Am I boring you with all
No,
this
you're
stuff?
not boring me at all. It's very
Okay.
interesting. You said he got burned, that guy towards the end of it. Did you get burned?
No, I didn't touch. After he put that in the cake, you know, baked full, I just grabbed, I used, you know, the asbestos mitts to pull the cake out.
Right.
No, I used every precaution to get it out and put it aside so it didn't get mixed up. I had about maybe 6 or 7 cakes in there, and they all looked the same. I just wanted to make sure that it didn't get out on the line and feed the troops with that cake. So I pulled it and I didn't get burned. Although I got to tell you this, and this you might find real amusing. Let me tell you this story. I think I put that down here too. In the military, yeah, here it is. I got a bad burn, 40 days in an Army hospital. Let me expand on that. But that wasn't related to this other thing. This was a different incident.
Different incident.
Yeah. In the military, before you can throw any food out, to keep anything from getting spoiling to a point of maybe causing a disease kind of thing in the garbage, you know. It was a military rule that everything had to be cooked. I mean, no matter what you threw out. If you threw out potatoes that were rotten, still had to cook them. As absurd as it sounds. And onions, whatever it was, you had to cook it before you throw it out. We had bad meat, I had to cook it before I threw it out. You know, you kind of threw it all in one pot.
Mm-hmm.
You know when you're not going to serve it, and then you threw it in the garbage pail and it got... Well, what had happened, and I didn't know, was some military, I hadn't come on duty yet. I was in the afternoon, I was coming on in the afternoon, and a bunch of guys in the morning had thrown out some food that wasn't cooked. A whole bunch of onions, a whole pail of onions. And a military man had come, an officer had come by, and he told the guys, he says, that's got to be cooked. So they were a little lazy. So instead of taking this big garbage can and dumping it into a big pot and cooking it, they tried to cook it right in the garbage pan. So what they did was they put water in the garbage pan, and they put a steam hose into the garbage can and tried to cook it. Well, they didn't get it all cooked. The only part that cooked was the bottom of the garbage can. And so they went off duty. I came back on duty, and and an officer was coming by, and he saw this garbage can. He says, what's the idea of those onions not being cooked? I said, I don't know where that came from. He says, well, until they're cooked, put a lid on. Put a lid on it, you know, to hide it, so to cover it up. And then he left. He took off with his car. So I couldn't get the lid on it. And so, you know, I don't know if you've had the experience. When you can't get a lid on a garbage can, you shove the garbage in with your foot. Well, I did that. And I rolled through the raw onions into the cooked onions. I had my leg in near boiling water. And, you know, I was shocked. I said, I didn't, you don't know what's happening to you until it happens. And I pulled it out, but it was too late. I had burns right through my skin from the boiling water. And that's when I got shipped right to a doctor who put me in the hospital for 40 days. And for 40 days, they just nursed me back to health. That was an experience. Again, I'm probably going out on a limb here, but again, I was 22 years old, and one of the duties they gave me was feeding immature babies. So I had to take these babies out of incubators that weighed about 1.5 pounds, and I had to feed them. I had to cuddle this little thing in my arm. You know. I was shaken, but I had a nurse there. She was, they called her Stonewall Jackson. She was a tough woman. She says, you're going to learn how to feed babies, Dellerba. You know, they don't even call you by your first name. And I said, well, I'm going to hurt this little baby. You won't hurt him. And they made me put a little bottle in her mouth, and I fed babies. That was one of my duties while I was in the hospital. Because I wasn't that hurt, I was able to walk around, but they had to keep me a long time to make for that burn to heal. Burns take a long time to heal. So that was an experience. Then the other duty I got, which turned out to be something I kind of enjoyed, and I hope I don't embarrass you in this situation, they made me serve breakfast, lunch, and dinner to the nurses, to the officers' wives. Okay? So when I used to go in for breakfast, I'd have an officer's wife in her baby doll pajamas. Now can you imagine a young guy trying to serve girls in their 20s who are in their pajamas? I mean, I almost felt like it was not right. You know, I said, you got to get a female to do this. No, you're going to do it. So, you know, I was trembling because these girls didn't look like they were, you know, presentable for, you know, it's almost like walking into a girl's dormitory. You know, and back in the 60s, it wasn't, you didn't have the exposure you have today. You know, it was a much more conservative world. So it was really embarrassing to me, and I was kind of trembling there. And it was again, a different experience, but a good experience. So I went through that. And that was my 2 experiences. And then one more friendship I made in the hospital. A young girl used to feel sorry for me, and she used to come over and talk to me every day. And I never got her name, but she became my friend in the hospital. She made it a point to every day when I was in the day room, so-called day room, she would come over and talk to me. So again, I hope I'm not boring.
No, you didn't bore me. That's really interesting. Did you feel American interference at this time was necessary?
I felt that we should still be there. Yeah, I think too, because the war, is still fresh in the minds of many people, and I think there was the threat that possibly a certain amount of Germans may have been bitter enough to try to, get somebody together, group together, and get right back to where they were in World War II, try to take over the country. Fanatics, some fanatics. So I think for a while, I don't know if it's true today, it's been a long time now, we're talking a long time, but then it was only about 17 years, and I think it was necessary now. Less now, but I think we've pulled a lot of troops out of Germany and sent them like Afghanistan and other places, but then I think it was important that we be there.
What did you do when you arrived home?
You mean the first minutes I was in the States? That was another experience. I met a Spanish kid. Diaz was his name. I can't think of his first name, but his last name was Diaz. And they just let us off the ship, and they said, well, you're on your own. But I was kind of lost. I didn't know where to go. I was going to try to find a hotel, but it's scary in New York City, your way around. You can end up in Harlem, or in a bad part of the city, or just like Miami today is dangerous in certain areas of it. So this guy said, well, stay over at my house. So we went over to his house, and he had about 13 kids in the family. So they just cordoned everything off with towels, or sheets. And they gave me a sheeted bedroom, just a sheet on this side, a sheet on, and they gave me a little mat to sleep on. So I stayed at his place. But prior to going there, we had an experience. I had an experience. He says he went one way and I went another, and there was I ended up in a shady part of New York, which I could have got hurt. Like I said, in Harlem, and this girl kept calling me to go down this little stairway with her. But I said, no, I'm not going down there with you. I think she might have been a prostitute.
Right. And
because they think when you get off the ship, for years they had what they call the mustering out pay. They used to give them, the soldiers, huge amounts of money, like $1,000 or $2,000. And they used to try to get that from you, either by coaxing you for prostitution, or have somebody there club you over the head when you went down there and take your money, steal it from them. So I didn't go. And I found my buddy Diaz again, and he said, I'm glad you didn't go, John. You might have got killed. And we ended back up to his house, and then I think after that, the next morning, I was on a train, or it was a bus, and bused me back to Utica, New York, from New York City. And then I was very happy to be home again, needless to say, and my mother was open arms crying, and it was an experience to go see all that. But you suffer kind of an amnesia. Some of the people back at work I didn't know too well. I kind of forgot their names completely because I've been away for 2 years, and a lot had gone on, and I didn't realize that. And I went back to school, went back to college and finished that, got my degree in psychology, a BA degree in psychology.
So how long after that did you get an occupation?
Well, I had a job when I was drafted, so I went right back to that job, which is U.S. law. Whenever you're drafted and you got a job, they got to give you a job back. And then on the job, I got promoted from being a testing person to electronics technician. And then from that, I went to management. I became a supervisor. And then I became a plant manager. And then from that point on, I went to another manufacturing concern after that stint, and my last hat in industry was Vice President of Operations for a manufacturing concern. So I had a very lucrative job in civilian life. And again, civilian life went good for me. I was able to. And the college helped some, but the psychology wasn't related to the manufacturing field because it's a different field. I was going to go into that, but I would have had to take about a considerable cut in money. And I just wasn't ready to do that. I didn't want to do that, so I stayed in manufacturing. And then manufacturing didn't go so well after I was disenchanted with it because at the time we were making, I don't know if you've studied this in your history, but that's when Japan was starting to make great products, good cars, good TVs, making us look bad because we were making junk here. And that's when I was in manufacturing. And I was trying to compete with the Japanese by making better products. And I was fighting it to a point I burnt out. So I got out of it. The last hat there, when I was vice president, I quit.
You quit?
I quit my job as vice president. And I went into banking. I went into some banking industry, which is a complete turnaround from what I was doing. And I stayed in there 2 years, and I wasn't going anywhere there. So then I was going to go into teaching. I was going to teach math. And I started to substitute teach. And I did a lot of substitute teaching here in Rome. Met a lot of people here, nice people. And became a teacher in Rome Catholic High, RCH. And I taught math for 1 semester. And then I just didn't pursue it. I had to go to get certification, you got to go for masters. And I was getting up in age, and I was tired, and I just didn't feel like... I went back to school for a little while, but I ran out of gas. I just got too tired, and I said, I'm just going to stop this. And that's when I came here and applied for the in-school job. That's where I've been since. And I've been in this for 10 years. So. And it's not exactly what I wanted, but I do help some kids some days. Not enough, because the kids I get in school, they're not the most motivated. They don't like to do their work. But the few that I do get there and that need help, I feel I'm able to help them with math. If they want it, I can help them with math. Because I got quite the background in math from college and from teaching. And that's where I am. I hope I didn't keep you guys too late.
No.
Got about a minute, 2 minutes on the tape.
Do you want to stop and do another tape then? Or do you...
I think, you want to call? I think
it's up to you. Do you want to call?
I think we're just about there, unless you got any other questions you want to ask me.
If you answer most of these other questions, that was... Yeah. We can stop, Love. Okay. Do you want to stop?
I appreciate this, you guys doing this, and I hope I helped your project some. Again, I'm a peacetime kind of soldier, so I got stories that aren't warlike.
No, they're interesting, though.
Oh, okay.
They're interesting. Did you bring any...
Oh, yes, I did. I don't have